this, so
Mhm.
it's fine.
Yeah.
All right, we are opening up so people will start coming in now.
Okay. Thanks, Joe.
Good
Thank
luck,
you.
everyone.
All
Thanks,
right.
Joe.
Thank you. Bye, Joe.
Yeah. That's great.
The videos were amazing.
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. They are. And we're going to get
Power
to
in
see
their
that.
voices.
Yeah. Meg, I forgot, where are you located now?
In
Leslie told-
Chicago.
Chicago. Okay,
Yeah.
great. All right. Wonderful. Yep. Okay.
Meg,
And
I feel like, go ahead.
Sheila's in Atlanta, right?
Yes.
Yes, I had mute. Yes, I'm in Atlanta.
Great.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, hold on one second. I have to stop sharing for 1 second and we'll get started. I have to,
Meg, I was trying to figure out, did we meet through Project Amelia? Were you involved in Project Amelia, or we just met kind of online over the years?
No, we met at Powerhouse during that portfolio
my God, Meg, that's
review
where we
when
met.
Larry and I
amazing.
did that.
Yeah, no, I remembered that. And then I thought we had another, but that's the only time we've met in person, right? And that was like a big impression.
I knew who you were. I think I knew who you were when you were
Right.
doing Project Amelia, which was incredible organizing on your guys' behalf.
Yeah, that was amazing. Yeah, Powerhouse. I remember that. That was really, really good. That was really good.
Well, I think that showed what the community can come together and do.
Mm-hmm. Boy,
when
that
they
seems
need
so
to.
long ago now. That was the first or second
Right?
year of Photoville. We had the container there. That was a big
Wow.
deal.
Different time.
Yeah, for sure.
okay, we are going to get started. Give me 1 second. I realized I put my notes on the wrong computer.
Good. I know you got a lot going. You just
Okay.
take your time.
All right. Thanks everybody for joining. We're just going to give everybody 1 or 2 more minutes to join us, and then we'll get started. We've got people coming into the chat saying hello. Thanks everybody. Good morning. Yeah, let us know where you're watching from. You can let us know in the chat where you're signing in from, so we have a sense of where everybody's coming from. Chile, Wheeling, West Virginia, New York City,
Yay.
Argentina, Alexandria,
Wow.
Dallas, Fort Worth, Silver Spring, Maryland,
It's so great.
Manhattan, Chile.
UK.
Oh my gosh, Brooklyn, DC. We've got a lot of people signing in right now.
Egypt.
Egypt.
Wow.
Alexandria, Egypt. Woohoo! Ocean Park, Washington, Champaign,
Bulgaria.
That's
Welcome.
great.
Sophia. Wonderful.
So fun, Meg, right?
Yeah. Amelia
Yeah.
Island.
Great.
Great. Okay, we're going to give people about another 30 seconds and then we'll get started.
That's what you
Hey,
like.
Chantal. Yay.
This is it. We can't be together in person, but look at everybody all over the world. This is
I
Yeah.
know.
so
Zoom
wonderful.
kind of works.
It works.
Fantastic.
There's a lot of more opportunities for these conversations thanks to this terrible moment, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Good morning, everybody. Okay, let's get started. Good morning. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Today's webinar, Urgent Pictures, Photographs of Unrest, Reconsidered in Isolation and Future Imagination, is part of Focus on the Stories 2020 Virtual International Photo Festival. Focus on the Stories' mission is to support visual storytellers of diverse backgrounds in bringing attention to critical issues so that we can spark social change. And today's discussion is perfectly aligned with that mission. Please use the chat box, which a lot of you are using now to tell us where you're logging in from, to let us know if you're also having technical issues. And we are going to have a discussion after the presentation, so the Q&A box is a great place or the perfect place to put your questions that you might want to ask. And we like to unmute people to ask their questions, so let us know you want to ask a question or put it in there. We'll unmute you and allow you to ask it. Unless you want to ask anonymously, just go ahead and type it in as an anonymous question and we'll still take that as well. I want to introduce the creator of this panel, Lesly Deschler Canossi. And this panel is Lesly's brainchild, and she is also going to lead the discussion as moderator. Lesly is a cultural producer, a photographer, and a photo educator. She is faculty at the International Center of Photography and co-creator of Women Picturing Revolution. She holds an MFA from Maryland Institute College of Art and has taught at Columbia University, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and the Lamar Dodd School of Art in Cortona, Italy. In 2016, Lesly, along with independent curator and artist Zoraida Lopez-Diago, created Women Picturing Revolution, which surveys female identifying lens-based artists who document war, conflicts, crises, and revolution in private realms and public spaces. Special focus is placed on the impact conflict has on women and girls. Most recently, Women Picturing Revolution presented at the Tate Modern in London on the topic of their forthcoming book, Representations of Black Motherhood and Photography for Fast Forward Women in Photography. And before we get started, I want to recognize Maria Danielle Balcazar, an amazing photographer in her own right, who has been featured on an earlier Focus on the Story webinar, and who has joined us to help translate today. So Maria, thank you so much for joining.
You're welcome.
And yeah, thank you. Lesly, we are very happy to collaborate with you on this panel, and I'm going to stop sharing my slides. Actually, I realized that I didn't even go through my slides yet, but I'm going to stop sharing this one right now and turn it over to you. And thanks everybody again for joining. Lesly, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Shelley. So I'm not going to share my screen just yet, but I wanted to thank Shelley and Joe for this invitation, and also Katie Jet Walls, who's the editor of Confluence magazine, who invited me to create a panel for Focus on the Story, and also just to acknowledge how quickly you all were able to get the festival online is incredible. I think people really are craving this community. I don't want to talk too long as we have much to cover, but just to give an origin of Urgent Pictures. In full disclosure, this idea came to me weeks and weeks ago, and really took shape when we went into isolation at the beginning of COVID-19 in this country. And I just was drawn to looking at these pictures, especially from Whose Streets, Our Streets, the show that we'll feature today that Meg is a co-curator, thinking about what it meant to be body solidarity again in the streets, not knowing what would happen in the past week or two in terms of the numbers of people out, rightly so. So you can imagine the only pictures of protests we were seeing at that time around the world, but around the world were still people fairly distanced, masked up, quiet kind of situations for the most part. We were also seeing artists doing various protests at home. It was bringing together people in the web. So when I shaped this, it was much more about the idea of how to protest in mutual care of isolation. So here we find ourselves in this incredible moment, which we will get, a lot of that will be thread throughout today's presentation. So we're gonna first look at a couple of quick things just to set it up. Then we'll pivot to Meg and the show Whose Streets, Our Streets, from the that was at the Bronx Documentary Center in 2017. And then we'll shift to Wara's work and Sheila. So I just want to hand it over to, I'll turn on the screen share now. And let's see here. You've got my screen?
We do.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Okay. So I just want to say just quickly how much, especially in this moment, how honored and delighted I am to have all of these women here, and that I don't take it lightly, your time and your energy and the contribution you've made intellectually and artistically to the conversation. So I want to acknowledge that. And also, Maria, thank you for being here. So having said that, I think we'll start. I have a few things to share. So Shelley, my screen is good. You're only seeing Wara's image, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, great. So I wanted to read everyone's bio. So Meg Handler. Meg Handler is of the Village Voice, following the Voice New York Magazine, Colors, and Polaris Images. She's edited a number of books, including the monograph Phil Stern, A Life's Work, Paparazzi by Peter Howe, and Pot Culture by Shirley Halpern, among others. Meg co-curated Whose Streets, Our Streets, New York, 1980 through 2000, which was shown at the Bronx Documentary Center and continues to travel. After 20 years of immersion in photography business and having worked with some of the greatest photographers in New York and abroad, Meg now lives in Chicago. Meg received a Bachelor of Fine Arts in photography from the Rochester Institute of Technology. And Meg is coming in from Chicago. Wara Vargas Lara is a Bolivian photographer who grew up with photography in the family of visual artists. Bolivian rituals, women, and the history of her country are themes throughout her work, documenting the work of traditional midwives in Bolivia with support from National Geographic. And Sheila Pree Bright is an acclaimed fine art photographer known for her photographic series, Young Americans, Plastic Bodies, and Suburbia. Her work, 1960 Now, examines race, gender, and generational divides to raise awareness. These Now photographic series and book document. Bright's photographs appeared in the 2014 feature-length documentary Through the Lens Darkly, Black Photographers and the Emergence of the People. Her work has been exhibited at the High Museum of Art, Atlanta, Smithsonian National Museum of African American Museum, Washington, D.C., the Museum of Contemporary Art, Cleveland, among others. 1960s Now series is a collection of in the collection of the Smithsonian African American History of Culture. We're delighted you're here. Thank you, thank you. And I wanted to start off just with a few things that were coming up in the past weeks. This is the work of Lola Flash, who's an American photographer. Her work has also often focused on social, LGBTQ, and feminist issues. She was an active participant in ACT UP during the time of so I'm using this as a starting point. These images are quite different than what we'll see in terms of how they look visually, but the content is a thread throughout today. This is a cross process she did to the images. These are protest images from 1990 and 1987. Today. So you can see in the image in the middle of the AIDS epidemic. And she writes, but I was a bit too young, she says. I was too young for the demonstrations about the Vietnam War. I wasn't happy there was an AIDS crisis, but I was happy to be part of a movement and see how we as a people can get things done. So although I said this is quite a different kind of looking image, I love kind of thinking about Lola's work as a beginning and end point to the talk, in that these images of protest can be one thing at the time, but later they can become objects that also enter into art history and a longer history of art making and activist practices. And then one thing that came up this week as I was putting this together is Instagram became this site, as usual, where we go and find work and look at work and think what our colleagues are thinking about. This is Greg Miller, who's a photographer, and this came up for Greg this week. Let me share these images. He posted, I was sickened last month to see the video of Ahmaud Arbery gunned down in broad daylight just a few days ago, and the heartbreaking video of George Floyd.
Hey, Leslie.
These pictures are from August 1989. Yes.
Sorry to break in. Every once in a while, we're getting some audio issues from your side. And I'm wondering if If you want, I can try to share the slides from my side, or perhaps turn off your video while you're showing your slides. It might help with the, you want to see if that helps with the bandwidth issue? It's not consistent, but it keeps creeping up.
Okay, should I go back a slide? I apologize.
No, I think you can keep going from here, but there's just sometimes it gets a little bit wobbly.
Thank you, I apologize.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, so I want to go back. These pictures are from August 1989 when Reverend Sharpton organized one of the many protests seeking justice for the murder of Joseph Hawkins, a 16-year-old boy who with two of his friends happened upon an ambush of young white youths in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. Every time Reverend Sharpton saw an opportunity, he organized one of these protests in an effort to, like Martin Luther King Jr., expose to bring to light the ugliness that we needed to heal. And then Greg continues, I grew up in the South that had never in my life seen such a barefaced racism on display like that day. People from Bensonhurst neighborhood flooded the streets, throwing watermelons, flipping obscene gestures, and yelling racial words at the peaceful protesters. But what I did see growing up in the South, or rather didn't see, was institutionalized racism that exists everywhere in the U.S. Our zoning laws, police departments, racism that's invisible to most everyone, but those that it hurts. And it's been there all along and alive and well in 2020. Not seen unless exposed, like these two murders would have been if it hadn't been for smartphones. Shelley, how's the audio? A little better?
Yeah, it's better. We're at 1 or 2 seconds of wobbliness, but it's definitely better now. Thanks.
Okay. So I'd like to show a 4-minute clip from Whose Streets Our Streets, which is the show that I mentioned a few times that Meg Handler co-curated with Tamar Carroll, a historian from RIT, and Michael Kember, the founder of the Bronx Documentary Center. The film was produced and edited by Josh Meltzer. It's a clip. I'm just going to show the clip, Meg, and then we can kind of talk about it. I think it's...
A lot of my photographs were taken in a period of time in history that was extremely turbulent within the city of New York.
Hey, Leslie.
South Bronx was ground zero for a lot of the destruction and urban decay that was taking place within New York City at the time. And that was the context in which I started taking photographs. The city angry, crime against people of color was on the rise, very much similar to what's going on today.
I mean, it was a very dark time for, well, politically, we, had first Reagan and then Bush. For people with AIDS in general, it was, terrifying. The access to health care, just the social climate, the stigma. But an organization like ACT UP, or the growth of it, was actually just amazing.
Often what demonstrations can do is to foreground an issue, okay? Bring it into the public consciousness. Because if you keep putting it forward and You know, eventually it gets included in the official dialogue. We hope.
Sometimes in photography, you put your finger on the button, and when you're pressing it down, you're really working from the subconscious. I mean, you know, when I walked into this community and looked at what was happening, I mean, you know, I'm very familiar with a lot of the issues growing up. In my childhood years, I was watching in my neighborhood of Brooklyn, you know, on a bus, riding through burning buildings and angry African-American and Latino men and women, you know, that left an imprint in my head.
During that period of time, there was like demonstrations almost every week, every other day and stuff. So much so that I quipped to my friends, hey, that was the riot diet. You know, you wanted to work out, you go to a demonstration, you'd be running up and down the street in no time.
It's one of the most visible ways to find out what people are thinking and feeling, right? I mean, often, you know, we get these polls that say people think blah, 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 and all that. When people put their bodies on the street, then you really have a sense that this is important to them.
I felt very aware that the photographs I was taking felt iconic, you know, and it was not by some, you know, because I'm a great photographer, it was just the period of time that we were photographing in. The relationship between New York City Police Department and people from the community, whether it's the South Bronx, Manhattan, or Brooklyn and Queens, are relatively the same. You know, there's a lot of mistrust there. It comes from years of particularly within people of color communities where they feel that the city is very much complete impunity and there is no redress or recourse for people to respond.
Right. Shelley?
Yeah, I just, yeah, I think probably, you want me to, I'll take over the slides, and that might help with the audio. Does that make sense? Leslie, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Shelley.
Okay.
The video is available. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
there's an audio issue on my end. Is available on the website. It's 18 minutes to a free video. Meg, I hate to set you up with some audio issues. Yours should be fine.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Hopefully you could hear. Were people to hear the audio in the video?
I was able to hear most of it.
Most of
thank
it.
you. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And,
go ahead, Shelley.
and I was going to say, Leslie, why don't you let me share the slides, and maybe that will help on it with the, since I have the presentation. Just give us 1 second, everybody.
Certainly.
And then I will run the slide deck and we'll go from there.
One thing I wanted to add that I didn't add earlier was, in addition to the kind of distance pictures we were seeing at the beginning of COVID, we were also seeing the armed men in Michigan kind of threatening lawmakers with guns because they wanted the right to not wear masks or, you know, have freedom to go get their hair cut or whatever, and the freedom to possibly become ill. And I think about those images as opposed to the images of what's happening in the streets now. And then it's just incredible, this moment that we're in, obviously, and how these images that we're looking at now, in particular with Meg's images, serve as, you know, historical documents, but also activators in real time. So that's something I wanted to add. So Meg, I'm going to be quiet, but welcome.
Thanks. Thanks for having me. Thanks everybody for joining us. Well, I guess I'll start by just giving a little bit of background, which is that I graduated college and moved to New York City and decided that I didn't want to be a working photographer. I wanted to do my work on the side, and I have made my living as a photo editor and curator for a little over 30 years. So the photographs that you're going to see were made you know, it's just like Ricky Flores was saying, they were made with the intention of being historical documents. You know, at that time, unless we were on assignment, we didn't have any real-time outlets like we do now. So when I made these pictures, I was wanting to document what was going on in the culture and what my friends were experiencing, and, you know, the political issues that I was that I felt affected me, my friends. And I was in my early 20s. So that was, I wanted to be a photographer. So I went and I photographed what was meaningful to me. But but knowing I was not at that time going to market it. I was not going to try and get it published. I just wasn't set up that way. So for me, it was very natural to go into these situations, make pictures, leave, look at my work, and just put it away. I showed it to my friends, but we didn't really have outlets. So, I have to say I was shooting for myself, hoping it would have some meaning decades later. Little did I know. But that's why I was there. And I photographed at demonstrations because I was interested in how people function in public spaces, and when they go to express themselves, how does that look? Body language, clothing, facial expression. This was what I was interested in. So what you're looking at now is a picture from what was called the Ashes Action. That was a civil disobedience coordinated by ACT UP ACT UP from New York, and people from all over the country came to Washington, D.C. at the request of their loved ones who died, and they brought their ashes to the White House lawn, and they dumped the ashes of their loved ones on the White House lawn. If you could, I think the pictures there when they're up against yes. Okay, so if you can place this next to what we've been seeing the last few weeks, this is right up against the White House fence. So this is, pre 9/11. There was security by the White House, but you could get up to the fence. You had to fight horses and cops, but we got there. I mean, this whole group of people got there, and there's a great 20-minute little short film about this action that you can find online, and it's incredibly powerful to watch. But this is a perfect example of, why we had to be there. And, you can see the pain in people's faces, but also the need to just express themselves, make a point, throw ashes of your loved ones on George Bush's White House lawn. I mean, that's one of the greatest acts of civil disobedience ever.
Right.
I think.
Meg, may I ask you a question, Meg?
Of course, please.
Okay, thank you. So could you speak to the relationship at that time between activist organizations and photographers, and especially ACT UP, that had such a savvy, they understood design, they understood photography, and that also that connection to some of the Village Voice pictures, so that were published in Village Voice.
Right.
To that relationship, that understanding that what I gained from your scholarship with the show was this thought about activists knew photographers, and they hoped those photographers would come, and then sometimes they'd see the images in the Village Voice and feel as if, something we did here will have more reach because it made it onto that site.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the one of the kind of tenets, maybe you'd call it, of Who Streets and the photographers that are represented in that show is that almost all of us were independent photographers, freelance photographers. So we weren't bound to some of the, kind of age-old ethical issues of being neutral and just an observer. And, we actively engaged with each other. We worked in concert. Sometimes I was photographing for organizations just to give them pictures of their event. Other times photographers were involved in the planning. I wasn't, but photographers that are represented in the show are definitely were actively involved in ACT UP, WHAM, WAC, housing organizations, So you could call it activist photography, but I'm not sure I want to minimize it like that. I think we're more just independent.
Right. Well, I was thinking more of the activist organizations understood to have photographers. Yeah. Which is different now because it's almost a given that photographers will be there and that there's not always photographers who know the people that are there photographing, where I got the sense that, some of these works in the show, people were in the community. They knew, I think that's definitely shifting, and we're in a moment when people are really asking, they're being very vocal about who are making the pictures and who's local to the cause or who's local to the area. And I think Ricky definitely spoke to that in the film. Go ahead, Shelley, if you don't mind. Go ahead.
Yeah, and that's become really so much more important now. The question of who is making the pictures and why, what your intentions are. And I know there are a lot of photographers watching, and I think that, that is a very important thing to be conscious of, especially now. Why are you out there? What are you making pictures for? Who are you making pictures for? And from where do you sit making those pictures? Those are questions we all have to ask ourselves. And I'm still asking myself those questions. So I'm glad we're showing this. This was another civil disobedience. It was called Block the Holland Tunnel. And if you can just imagine, thousands of activists marched to the Holland Tunnel, laid down in front of traffic, and blocked the tunnel. And as you can see here, everybody's arm locked, limp, ready to be arrested. I mean, it was just a part of it. You went, you made your point, you got arrested, you went through the system, 24 hours of a bench warrant, but like just a fine. And then they went back out there. So I think that this, I don't know, this is really illustrative of, putting your body on the line.
Exactly.
You saw some pictures in the film of huge die-ins on, Fifth Avenue. And I don't know if that doesn't send a message, I don't know what does.
Right.
So,
It's this idea of why people ever go out and do this is because there just hasn't been change. It hasn't moved. The needle hasn't moved, right? In the way that we expect the leaders, you expect something, but when it doesn't move, it's back into the street. And I found that, go ahead, you can keep going, Shelley. Thank you. I found that, looking at these pictures, all of your pictures, all of the work we'll look at today, it really, there's something really hard to look at the pictures, but also really hopeful that people I wish we didn't have to do this. I wish people were out in the street right now putting their lives at risk. But the fact that people make this choice and go out and look at the numbers we have now, go ahead, keep going, Shelley, is really hopeful. One thing about Meg also, just as we kind of wrap up these images is that I found for you in particular, a lot of great photographers are able to do this, but in your work, you always make a point to show both sides. So the demonstrators and the counter demonstrators. And could you just speak to that a bit? How you, I know in the film, later on in the film, you speak to that, but I'd love to hear about your conscious choice. What happened for you to realize that was something that you were doing?
Well, I mean, it really begins with the fact that, you know, I was photographing pro-choice demonstrations and you know, Operation Rescue was there.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, this picture is pretty suggestive of the demographic. And, you know, as a 23-year-old, like, I didn't understand how they felt they could tell us what to do with our bodies. It was so anathema to me that because of how I grew up, because that was an inherent right. And I started watching them and I don't know. I mean, I'll just be honest. I felt sorry for them. They seemed not rational. And I found myself in not understanding them, that maybe I was being judgmental.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to understand why they felt the way they did.
Mm-hmm.
And so I photographed them a lot. And I learned that really they're fundamentalists, you know, they're fundamentalists and they believe in the Bible and the word of the Bible. And they really didn't veer from that. And at the time, I felt that it seemed a little brainwashy and culty and weird. And and I always like photographing stuff like that. And, you know, in a really devastating way, that was confirmed a few weeks ago when we heard about Norma McCorvey, AKA Jane Roe, and that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, she had been paid to be their pawn. So, you know, you start thinking about how all these people were bussed up to the homes of doctors to protest. Who paid for that? So there were all these questions even back then about who they were.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I mean, I'm sad looking at these pictures because, you know, we're still fighting. And, you know, you see a film like that documentary, which I encourage everybody to watch, AKA Jane Roe, that it's all a setup. It's all a spectacle and a setup, and it's all about the visual marketing and how we consume the news about this stuff. And they were savvy.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really glad I did it.
Right. But at the time, it seems that you were, you know, maybe all that wasn't totally clear. And some of the images, I encourage people to go to Meg's website under demonstrations. And I chose just a few images. There's so many images of both the protesters and the counter protesters. And I think on both sides, go ahead.
No, and by the way, I mean, I distinctly remember feeling like a little bit that people were wondering why I was photographing
the
antis, as we called them, so much.
I'm sure. Mm-hmm.
Why are you giving them attention? Why are you giving them a voice? And the fact is, and this is important, even if you don't agree with what you're photographing, what an organization is doing, if you have the stomach for it, you have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can, if you can.
It's a conversation I had with an up and coming, she's really interested in finding people who are doing that tough work, the work that maybe goes up against, you know, what they'd like to promote, but they're taking the time to get to know the other side. And, you know, that's a conversation certainly that's happening.
Yeah.
So Meg, there's so much more, but
no, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
Thanks everybody for listening.
Thank you. So we're gonna share a video that is not Wara's work, but I'd like to use it to introduce her work. Many are aware of this, some are not. This is a video that I pulled from The Guardian. Since November 2019, A Rapist in Your Path has been sung everywhere from France to Mexico to Kenya and India as a protest against the systemic use of sexual violence to repress women. Most recently it was performed, I'm not sure if it was most recently, but recently it was performed outside the New York courtroom where Harvey Weinstein was on trial. It was created by a Chilean performance artist known as Latisif. So we're going to play the video to give you a scope of this, this protest movement.
Before we try this, I'm going to try to play the video from here. But if it doesn't work, then we're going to be putting the link to the videos in the chat, and also it will be available after. But because we've had issues, I just want to forewarn everybody.
Okay. I really hope it plays. It's a key piece here.
Yeah, I think the problem is that I now need access to your Google Drive.
Okay, well, how about I just play it real quick
You
from
want to
my
try
drive
and see if it works from your?
Yes,
Let me
yes,
stop
yes.
sharing and then you play, and let's
Okay.
try and see if your sound works. Yeah.
Okay. And even if the sound is not perfect, I think the people will feel, they'll get the feeling. So are we sharing my screen right now?
Yep.
Okay.
El patriarcado es un juez que nos juzga por nacer y nuestro castigo que no ves. ¡Vamos! El patriarcado es un juez que nos juzga por nacer y nuestro castigo es la violencia que ya ves. Es femicidio. Impunidad para el asesino. Es la desaparición. Es la violación. Y la culpa no era mía, ni dónde estaba, ni cómo vestía. Y la culpa no era mía, ni dónde estaba, ni cómo vestía. Y la culpa no era mía, ni dónde estaba, ni cómo vestía. Y la culpa no era mía, ni dónde estaba, ni cómo vestía. Y la culpa no era mía, ni dónde estaba, ni cómo vestía. Y la culpa no era mía, ni dónde estaba, ni cómo vestía. Y la culpa no era mía, ni dónde estaba, ni cómo vestía. Ni loco, la culpa se le pagó a ni me paga, ni loco. Y la culpa no era mía, ni dónde estaba, ni cómo vestía. Y la culpa no era mía, ni dónde estaba, ni cómo vestía. El violador eres tú. Son los pacos. El presidente. El Estado opresor es un macho violador. El Estado opresor es un macho violador. El Estado opresor es un macho violador. El violador es tú.
Okay. Shelley? You're muted right now, Shelley?
Do you want me to go back to sharing? I'll go back to sharing the
Yes,
slides.
please.
Yep. Okay.
So
That
people
was-
were able to see?
Yeah, that was incredible. Yeah.
Right.
It's,
So you're going to go back to the slides. Thank you.
mhm.
I'm always so happy we can be together in Zoom land, but there. So, Wara,
Yeah.
Vargas, Lara, we're so honored that you're here. It's a pleasure to meet you kind of in this capacity. I realize that this is not, this is not Wara's video content, but I really wanted to set up the tone of where some of the things that Wara has covered in protests in multiple countries even her more personal work that involves the midwifery traditions. In my mind, all of this is work that clarifies and elevates and protects women and children, including this work. So although we're not able to look at her other work that she's doing with her National Geographic support, I encourage everyone to go to her website and look at that work. So today we're only focusing on her images she's made in protest. You can go back one. And I think I'm going to hand the microphone over to Maria, who's working with Wara as support in Spanish.
Bueno, bueno, primero me gustaría agradecer por la invitación. Gracias, Leslie, y a todo tu equipo. Estoy muy contenta de estar acompañada con ustedes hoy día. Yo he trabajado como, primero, María, perdón.
First, I would like to express my gratefulness for your invitation. Thank you, Leslie, and all your team. It is a great pleasure to share with all of you.
Durante 15 años he trabajado como fotoperiodista, he cubierto muchas protestas con diferentes consignas, pero mi enfoque y compromiso principal siempre ha sido la lucha feminista.
I have worked 15 years as a photojournalist, and I have covered many protests on several issues, but my personal concern and commitment is focused on feminist struggles.
Durante todo este tiempo me he dado cuenta que la mujer se ha vuelto protagonista de sus propias luchas y de las luchas de los pueblos, de varios pueblos de Latinoamérica. Los cuerpos de las mujeres son ahora territorio de lucha.
During all this time, women have become more protagonists of their struggles in Latin America. Their bodies have become fighting territories.
Esta foto es de unas protestas de la primera marcha de Ni Una Menos en Bolivia.
This photo is about a march in Bolivia, not one less.
Esta foto es de este 9M del último año, donde las mujeres bolivianas están ya protegiendo a las mujeres indígenas, ¿no? Antes la lucha solamente no se daba tanto protagonismo a la lucha de mujeres de raza indígena, y esta marcha fue muy importante también para mí.
This was an important march for her. Women have begun protecting women, and this was taken in La Paz.
Es de la misma marcha, pues.
That's the same march.
Esta es una protesta que cubrí en Brasil contra la Copa Mundial, pero es importante porque las feministas también estaban apoyando en otro tipo de luchas como el tema del fútbol, ¿no? En esta otra foto. Eran como 200 mujeres apoyando no a la Copa Mundial de Fútbol en Brasil.
This was in Rio de Janeiro. Women that are very active with women's issues and participated in the football and the soccer World Cup in Brazil, all the protests that were taking place. And like 300 women participated.
Puedes pasar las fotos si quieres. Esto es en Chile, las mujeres bailando El Violador en tu Camino. Tuve la alegría de ir ahí a cubrir y a conocer también a las chicas de tesis.
This is The Rapist is Dancing in Your Path. She was lucky to be in this place and in this march and to be working here.
Y esto es aquí en Washington, ¿no? Cuando las tesis llegaron a la marcha.
This is here in Washington, where the thesis came here to Washington, D.C.
Leslie, that's the last slide.
Yes. Maria, may I ask a question? You'll translate Wara. You've been photographing, a professional photographing for 15 years. Is there anything different or activating about this particular feminist protest experience that you've seen or noticed or felt in the past few years? Is it
Wara, ella te pregunta si en estos 15 años que has estado trabajando en estos movimientos de mujeres, si hay algo que podrías tú decir al respecto con esta experiencia que has tenido.
Durante este tiempo me he dado cuenta que la mujer se ha ido empoderando más y también las mujeres indígenas. Voy cortando, ¿no, María?
Sí. She says that she realizes that in all these years she's seen how progressively women are getting stronger and also indigenous women.
Y antes, también me he dado cuenta de que las mujeres solamente salían llevadas por tipo ONGs o organizaciones, y ahora es diferente. Ahora las mujeres salen por convicción, y ahora con el violador en tu camino me he dado cuenta que también hay más mujeres que están usando sus cuerpos como elemento artístico y performático para transmitir sus ideas.
See, even though before she realized that women would go out only with NGOs to protest and in groups, but with time she's seen that there is much more conviction involved, and not only that, but they are using their bodies as part of this protest.
Thank you. And where with these images with Wara, now Meg had spoken in a different era where she was making the images, first not necessarily on assignment. Wara is usually on assignment, or is she also making these images just as a freelance for herself? And how are they, where are they being used and shown?
Ella te pregunta si estas fotos, en diferencia a la persona que expuso antes, ¿tú usas estos por trabajo todas estas fotos o son personales, trabajos personales?
El tema de las tesis y de lo que cubrí en Chile fue un asignamiento, y las demás fueron protestas que son parte de Bolivia, parte también de unas historias que estaba yo haciendo en las favelas de Brasil, que son personales.
Yeah, the one in Chile, it was an assignment, and the other ones are personal, and I'm doing for Bolivia. She's been working in the favelas in Brazil, her own projects.
Wara, thank you so much for sharing this work with us. I want to acknowledge that each of these artists, we could do, a full 10-part series. So I always feel really conscious moving on, but we'll pick back up in the Q&A with Wara. Thank you. Gracias.
Yeah. Can I add something that we spoke with Wara, which I think it's a message? She told me last night that it pains her very much what is happening in your country. And I think that racism is the greatest virus of humanity. She is Bolivian. Her father is Quechua and her mother is a Chola. So she herself has suffered discrimination for having these indigenous features.
Yeah. Thank you. And so much of this struggle is about, compounded sexism and racism and the relationship between those two things, even back to, whose streets are streets. It talks about housing inequality and, police brutality and queer activism. It's all, it's all intertwined. Thank you, Wara, for sharing that.
Gracias a ustedes.
Gracias. And Sheila? Hello, Sheila.
Yeah, I was just taking it off of mute. Can you hear me?
Perfect. Welcome, Sheila. Again, I feel, I feel like we're moving really quickly, but I'm trying to be mindful of everyone's time. Sheila, thank you so much for being here. I know you need to leave probably during the Q&A to images, which is part of that's part of the process.
Yeah, I'll try to stay
Sheila,
a little bit. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Go
Sheila,
ahead.
so what we had planned is to share your film, and then, which is about 7 minutes, and then move into some of your pictures. But I wanted the focus to be, maybe you brought it up earlier about the work you're doing with the mothers, which is another thing to see, another part of this story. So that's what we'll do. So Shelley, I imagine that I'll need to share my screen for this as well.
Yes, I will stop sharing now.
Thank you so much. And Sheila, did you want to tell us anything about this film, or should we just go into it? I think it really speaks for itself.
Yeah, I think you need to go into it, and then I'll speak.
Okay. Thank you, Sheila.
Yeah, go into it. Yeah.
Thank you. And
okay.
If we have any, thank you, Sheila. And if we have any issues with, is my screen being shared?
I see it.
Yes, it is. And if there's issues, Leslie, I'll send you a text.
Great. And issues, everyone can just kind of turn off their video, but don't forget to turn it back on. Okay, I'll be quiet. Thank you.
I remember you was conflicted, misusing your influence. Sometimes I did the same, abusing my power full of resentment that turned into a deep depression. Found myself screaming in a hotel room. I didn't want to self-destruct. The evils of Lucy was all around me, so I went running for answers.
I would not say that the civil rights movement is dead. It's simply that we are moving to a new phase of the movement. Well, now 12 years, we struggle to end legal segregation and all of the humiliation surrounding legal segregation. So it was a struggle for decency. It was a struggle to get rid of extremist behavior toward Negroes. Now we are in a new phase, and that is a phase where we are seeking genuine equality, where we are dealing with hard economic and social issues. And it means that the job is much more difficult. It's much easier to integrate a lunch counter.
From this day forward, we will say the people woke up again. Yeah. And we started to treat Martin Luther King Day as a day of resistance for a resistant, militant fighter. Yeah. It is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win. It is our duty to win.
I was born again in the streets of Ferguson. I saw in the faces of young, black, angry, queer, single mothers sagging their pants, standing up before tanks and tear gas night after night. And so it changed me. It changed my belief in the capacity of the church to be able to support and celebrate our children who are victimized daily.
Our streets! Whose street? Our street! Whose street? Our street! Whose street? Our street! Whose street? Our street! Give us our shit! We'll shut shit down! Give us our shit! We'll shut shit down! We shut shit down! We shut shit down! We shut shit down! No peace! No justice! No peace! No justice! No peace! No justice! No peace! United we stand! Divided we fall! 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 Well, show me what democracy looks like! This is what democracy looks like! Show me what democracy looks like! This is what democracy
Dr. King's policy was that nonviolence would achieve the gains for black people in the United States. His major assumption was that if you are nonviolent, if you suffer, your opponent will see your suffering and will be moved to change his heart. That's very good. He only made one fallacious assumption. In order for nonviolence to work, your opponent must have a conscience. The United States has none. Has none.
days, this is one of them, when you wonder what your role is in this country and what your future is in it. No label, and no slogan, and no party, and no skin color, and indeed no religion is more important than the human being.
Abusing my power full of resentment. Resentment that turned into a deep depression. Found myself screaming in the hotel room. I didn't want to self-destruct. The evils of Lucy was all around me. So I went running for answers.
Intellectually, having no, don't walk away once we start talking. That's the problem with talking. Because you want to report that we're thugs and we're breaking security. You got these two big black dudes protecting you from all these black folks. We're the ones that need protection. Report for us. You're working for Fox News. Adam Jackson just went on Sean Hannity. Why are you running away? I'm not running. I don't have
He's running. He got Toronto on the right, y'all. No, he got Toronto on the right.
Talk to me. Just talk to me. Just talk to me.
Hey, Toronto, we on the
conversation. Yeah, because you're not lying. Because we are angry. But listen, a black man can raise his voice. A black man can raise his voice, and you don't have to be intimidated. Because I want you and Fox News to get out of Baltimore City. Because you're not here reporting about the boarded up homes and the homeless people under MLK. You're not reporting about the poverty levels up and down North Avenue. 2 years ago, when the 300-man march, and we marched from the top of Hilton to from Hilton and North to Milton and North, you weren't here. But you're here for the black riots that happened. Right? You're not here for the death of Freddie Gray. You're here for your story. No, I want to talk to you without the cameras. Hey,
where were our brothers and sisters to stand with us? Where were the clergy people to stand with us? Where were the politicians to stand with us?
An artist's duty, as far as I'm concerned, is to reflect the times. I think that is true of painters, sculptors, poets, musicians. As far as I'm concerned, it's their choice. But I choose to reflect the times and the situations in which I find myself. That to me is my duty. And at this crucial time in our lives, when everything is so desperate, when every day is a matter of survival, I don't think you can help but be involved. Young people, black and white, know this. That's why they're so involved in politics. We will shape and mold this country, or it will not be molded and shaped at all anymore. So I don't think you have a choice. How can you be an artist and not reflect the times?
Sandra Bland! Serenade! Sandra Bland! Serenade! Sandra Bland! Serenade! Sandra Bland! Serenade! 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 Won't you serenade? Hell! Hell you talking about? 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 Hell you talking about?
Sean Bell.
Say his name.
Sean Bell.
Say his name.
Sean Bell.
Say his name.
Sean Bell. Won't you
say his name?
Michael Brown.
Say his name.
Michael Brown.
Say his name.
Michael Brown.
Say his name.
We ought to come together. And we should not let no police, let no hater, let no spectator, or let somebody, listen, look around you. They don't live around here. They don't know what we go through. And it's time for them to start saying how we live. It is not right how we're living.
We love each other.
We love each other, and they want us to kill each other.
We love each other.
Unity. United we stand.
Divided we fall.
And divided we fall. No justice.
No peace.
No justice.
No peace.
No justice.
No peace.
And support each other.
We must love each other and support each other.
We have nothing to lose but our chains.
We have nothing to lose but our chains.
Thank you.
Okay, that's it. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, Sheila, yes. I just wanted to share two Sheila, oh, am I stopped sharing? Okay. Can you guys see Sheila's book here, 1960 Now?
Yes.
Do you see it?
I can see it, yeah.
All right, there it is, Sheila. This
Hi,
book.
everyone.
Welcome,
Yeah.
Sheila.
First of all, I would like to give honor to the families of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd. This video was done in 2016. And I, as an artist, a photographic artist, when Trayvon was the murder of Trayvon, I felt that I needed to go to the ground to find out what was going on myself as a woman and as a Black woman. And I felt that I was thinking about the young people back in the civil rights movement, and I engaged with the ones that they're older now, because I personally didn't know a lot about the civil rights because my parents didn't speak with me upon that. So as an image maker, I'm really interested in individuals and communities that are often unheard, which is controlled by Western thought and power structures. And I'm seeking the common thread to connect these human conditions. And I'm asking myself as an image maker, what do pictures want? Because all of us are image makers. We're going out photographing these images. I have a book out now, 1960 Now. I've traveled internationally, nationally, going to universities, speaking upon this work. And it seems like now, with the protests now, there's a protest within a protest. And I'm questioning, what does it mean to stand in solidarity? Are we all standing in solidarity? Are we still in our own individual tribes? And so I call it tribes. But so when this happened Friday, I didn't know that they were having a protest. And so I said, I have to do something else. You know, we have a lot of image makers right now that we are bombarded with this imagery, but what are we going to do with this? You know, because it has to lead into public policy. So I said, Sheila, what are you going to do? So I called the mothers, because I've been working on a project after I photographed. This is Dr. Rosalind Polk, who authored the Appeal for Human Rights, and Dr. Lonnie King, who started the Atlanta Student Movement. I reached out to them, and it made me understand a lot, because the only thing that Western thought will make people change is economics, and we're doing that right now. You see everybody out in the street, globally so. It's under the umbrella of Black Lives Matter. This is the mother's image. And so I felt, I'm all over the place, but I'm looking at the imagery and I'm trying to move fast because I got to go out and photograph. I felt that the mothers who we are fighting for are the mothers. The mothers are the glue that keeps everything together. And I wanted to focus on them. The lady in the middle in white is Eric Garner's mother, Miss Gwendolyn Carr, I Can't Breathe. We have George Floyd, I Can't Breathe. The rest of the women are from Atlanta, along with Samira Rice, the young kid that had the toy gun in Cleveland, Ohio. And I end up, it's a long, I can't really talk about all of this, but yeah, you just flow in the images, right?
Yeah, no, you don't have to get into the full detail here.
Yeah, because it throws me off about, but leave it there, right there. Well, no, because I did all the other stuff. I created a mural, but go ahead and flow the images that I did at the press conference.
Okay, sure.
Because I wanted to get back there. So I decided to go to the press conference because I felt that this is another side of the stories that we need to look at. These women, if I IG lived it with trying to photograph, and go to my IG and listen to these mothers and their stories. And it's not just about how their children passed, it's how they were treated in the system. And Atlanta is a place where they say, we don't have that problem here in Atlanta. Yes, you do. And this has to be exposed, because the mothers, along with state legislatures, were at this press conference, and they're trying to pass a bill called 636. And so going back to all of this, I think we as image makers, I'm saying for myself, is that the technology is allowing us to see everything now, and that's good. But how can we elevate this to another level? Because are these images really making people change? I feel that the world is changing, but it's hard for people to change. And I'm challenging myself. So I'm not putting off on everybody, but that's how I'm feeling right now about all of this. I feel that some of this now is becoming performance, okay? And we're losing the message of what's really going on. And with that being said, because I'm gonna have to go in about 5 or 10 minutes. And these are the images of the mothers that I took at the press conference. I would do a Q&A, because I know some people would want a Q&A with all of us. So I'll leave it as that, yes. Okay. But go to my IG, and if you have the time to listen to the HGTV and really listen to these mothers. And this is a state legislature that was with the mothers. It was very, very, very emotional. Very, very emotional.
Thank you, Sheila. So thinking about you said something earlier about also telling that story of the mothers beyond the story of the violence and the loss, but also their legal work, their activism.
Right.
That's where your focus is now. Because until people understand that, until they understand where this is coming from, people who have not had this lived experience.
Right, because Mr. King told me this, and he started the Atlanta student movement in Atlanta in 1960. He said, Ms. Bright, when we took off the signs, the black and white signs, he said that we thought we had it made. But he said racism did not go anywhere. And he said we were on cruise control. He started crying to me and told me, he said, it's our fault because we didn't teach y'all. So with all this going on now, the officers are been charged, but nobody has looked at Breonna Taylor. Those officers are still out.
Right.
So we can't stop. We must continue. But like I said, as an image maker, I need to find a way to elevate what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Sheila. I wanted to just share really briefly before we open the Q&A, Sheila, from your book, which you know I feel, from Alicia Garza, who's one of the co-creators of Black Lives Matter, about all of these images everyone here has presented. Documentation such as this reminds us that the way history unfolds is shared with those who will come after us is important. Under a new regime led by a white supremacist project that aims to bend the arc of history into the direction of the powerful and the undemocratic, the project of remembering is more critical than it has ever been. So with that, I think we'll open the Q&A. We want to be really mindful of everyone's time, Sheila. And if you have to leave, to the best of my ability,
I'll stay for about 5 minutes.
Okay. And then if anyone has questions about that Avedon picture.
Yeah, because I didn't get off into all that yet, Richard Avedon, and how it all came about.
But I can help that, or at least direct that in some way. I'm happy to do that as well. So thank you.
And actually the video, I didn't mean to butt in, the video, I'm gonna upload it on my webpage, but give me some time tonight and I'll put it up on there,
Sheila,
okay? Because I didn't have it up.
Don't forget that self-care, Sheila.
Yeah, I know.
All right. All right. So thank you. Again, each of you, I want you next to me for the next year so I can just talk to you, but we can't do that just yet. So we'll open up, I'll hand it off to Shelley, how you want to handle.
Sure. Then we've got a few questions in the Q&A box. I want to remind everybody, if you'd like to ask a question, go ahead and put that in the Q&A box and I will call on you. And I am going to first go to Gaitan, and give me 1 second to unmute you, and then I'll let you ask your question. Again, if you prefer to remain anonymous, you don't want to ask it live, that's fine. Just put your question in there anonymously, or just let me know that you don't, that you want me to read it out to others, and then, we'll do that. And I'm not doing very well scrolling. There we go. Okay, so Gaitan, you should be unmuted now.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your time. I do a lot of photography I'm in Harrisburg area. I do a lot of photography at events in my community. One thing I've always seen, one role I see being important as a photographer is not only being a chronicle, but also the ability to use pictures to perhaps sway the undecided towards our side. I'm thinking of the pictures of like the My Lai massacre in Vietnam, or even more recently, the pictures of the kids in cages.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether that wasn't part of this project or not, but do you also see yourselves as playing that role as well as trying to help shift opinions? Or are you just strictly doing this for posterity's sake?
Well, I can speak to that from two perspectives. One as a photo editor, and the other as a photographer. As a photographer, yes, you hope, depending on what the pictures are of, you hope you can change people's minds. But I don't think that just pictures do that. I mean, I think they contribute to people being able to open up their minds. They're one layer of the onion. Now, as a photo editor, it's interesting that you bring up the My Lai picture, because it's a perfect example of an image that people looked at, were horrified by. Obviously, if you want to look up the story behind My Lai, just Google it. It's too long to get into here. But the history of that famous photograph from My Lai changed over the years. So, I am the editor of Reading the Pictures, a site that writes about photography. Mm-hmm. And we did a very big article about the My Lai picture, because it was later revealed that the woman buttoning her shirt had been assaulted sexually. So that was unknown for many years. So I think that the historical relevance of pictures can take time. It's not immediate, obviously. So hope that gives you some perspective on that from me.
And just to answer the question that, there are many, many, many millions, thousands of pictures I would have loved to show, but within the confines of this and trying to highlight the work of the three guests. So thank you for bringing that picture up. Was there, Shelley, do you see any questions that are specific for Sheila, since she's needing to go out and work?
Well, not specific to Sheila, but I think this is something that would be really good to get your perspective on, Sheila, because I'm going to unmute Clinton, who had a question about showing the faces of protesters, because this has become a real safety issue for protesters, and just curious, I will let Clinton ask his question. Yeah.
Thank you.
Clinton, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can, go right ahead.
Okay, thank you all. Firstly, thank you all for sharing your time with us today. And I would just like to get a brief reaction from each of you guys on your reaction to the recent Pointer article that came out about concealing the identities of protesters so that they may not be targeted in the future. And this is specifically related to shooting for yourself, not necessarily on assignment, because you can't do that when you're on assignment. But if you just give a brief reaction to that, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Maria, do you mind translating that for Wara as well? About did you catch that about the possibility of there's lots of discussion around blurring the faces of protesters for their own security? So
okay, you can go on. I'll write it in. We're chatting, so I'll write it here. So you can go on.
I think that's a good question, actually, from that point of view, because I know I've been photographing the Black Lives Matter movement, and a lot of people, I don't know if they know this, in Ferguson, a lot of, I think it was 5 activists came up dead, okay? They're saying they committed suicide or whatever. And now we're in the age of COVID-19 and wearing masks. Maybe the protesters, since that article came out, maybe they do need to wear something to disguise their face. You know, because they're in public space. How do you deal with that, you know, as an image maker?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Sheila. I think we probably have a similar perspective on that. That you know, if you're going out in public to make your voice heard, and you don't want to be seen, then cover your face. As photographers, we have to be sensitive to it. Now, I'm not shooting right now for several reasons, but this is something that came up a few years ago where I started to feel a discomfort photographing people at protests because I saw them getting uncomfortable. And I only photograph people's faces. So I really had to start thinking about this. And I'm choosing to not do it because I just choosing to not do it. It doesn't fit with my practice. I think I can make a difference in other ways. Yada. I mean, I don't want to yada yada it, but we have to be brief. So,
because when you're in that public space of the streets, you really are not a lawyer. The way I always understood is you don't really have a legal right to kind of, you know, if you're out in a public space, it's understood that you could be photographed in any capacity. Like me walking down the street, in protest, and also just photojournalists should not and cannot ethically blur the face. But if we're not talking about photojournalists, and I'm not just, you know, other people out, it's 2 different questions.
And I just want to make one more quick point, which is that when I was photographing in the early 90s, everybody was being photographed because the New York City Police Department has a side unit called the Tactical Something Response Unit, and they take pictures of all the protesters. And that is what they do. That's what their purpose is. Now with technology, I don't even know. So to have the assumption as a person out in public that you are not being photographed at an event like that by the powers that be is maybe a little naive. Sorry. So I'm curious what Wara has to say.
With that thought, I'm gonna have to go. I enjoyed everybody, ladies, and thank you so much for me being a part of this, okay? Take care.
Bye, Sheila.
Thank you, Sheila.
Okay.
Well, stay
Much
safe.
love. Okay. Bye.
Okay.
Oh, I wish she could have stayed.
Sheila, I know. So, Wara, did you have a response to the question about?
Sí, María me envió y creo que es importante como fotógrafos ahora entender que nuestra fotografía puede causar problemas a las personas que protestan. En Latinoamérica se está tratando de criminalizar la protesta. Entonces nosotros estamos, como fotógrafos ahora estamos hablando de que también tenemos que proteger a estas personas. Maria?
Wara, what she's trying to say that what happens is that the protests are beginning to be in danger. So, and to criminalize that. She, as a photographer, had those experiences. And I think that certainly we should protect the people. And if she asked if somebody doesn't want to be in the camera or ask for that, and she would always respect that.
Thank you.
Okay.
I mean, I think that if you are a news photographer, you are on assignment and a person asks you not to photograph them, ethically, you probably shouldn't. But legally, you know, this is a First Amendment issue at one point, and these are complicated issues to balance. Your right to be out there to take pictures, their right to control their image, the narrative. It's just very complicated.
There was also a point, I believe it was Brent Lewis on, I saw it on social media. He made some really incredible points about it. I don't want to quote him, but maybe we can point to that article. But there's also a human element that we remove when we blur faces, right? And a lot of these pictures are also functioning as activators to get other people out, right? That they're seeing other people. So that first question about do we believe images make policy change? I mean, I think nobody would be doing this if they didn't believe there was a chance for that. Now, do the actual pictures change the policy? No, people change the policy, right? Laws change the policy. People showing up, the mothers who are standing there that Sheila photographed. That's the next point after the protest, or another story, a part of the protest. So that's a whole other conversation, but I think it is important for bodies to be in the street. You know, when we look back at those pictures that from the top of the program, you know, just knowing that, you know, I was a kid growing up in the Midwest and I saw those pictures. I was, 12 years old and I saw those act up protesters and locking arms in the middle of, New York City and in DC. And that profoundly changed me as a young person to understand that we could use our bodies and our friendships and our community to act up and protest. And it did have an impact on, my life. And I imagine millions of others, that you see people are willing to do this. It gives you hope that your voice really matters, right? So I don't know if what that has to do so much with the face, but there is a human element that we need to keep in the pictures. Thank you, Joe. I think looks like Joe might have found the articles. He's putting them in the chat.
Yeah.
Shelley?
Yeah, so we have a question from Ellen Jacob, and I'm going to unmute her now. Ellen, you are set to ask your question.
Thanks. I think I have another ethical question. Meg, I share your discomfort and sadness that you were speaking about over the current protests and the ones you covered. And I feel like we keep fighting the same battles. I was 12 when Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated, and I've been protesting my entire life. And I'm also an immigrant rights activist, which, as we all know, is race-based. So I'm also an artist photographer, and I think a lot about being white and the ethics of that and my white, privilege, and how to be an ally and how to make room for my voice, but at the same time, and more importantly, how do I make room for the voices of those I'm in support of? So I'd love to hear you talk about how you deal with this. Well, you've already mentioned that you're not covering the current protests. And I also would have loved to have heard Sheila's thoughts about it. But I think I struggle with this. Anyway, I turn it back to you. Thanks.
Well, thank you for such an interesting question. Sorry, I'm echoing. Well, this is a question, something I've thought about my whole career. What are my intentions? What's my place? Who am I vis-a-vis this situation? Do I have a right to be here? So I get all that, and I've navigated it this is a vague answer, but I've navigated it the best way I know how, which I think is choosing to make pictures of subjects that I feel connected to. And this is on one end. And on the other end, it is to photograph subjects that I don't know much about, that I'm not comfortable with.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But in the last 10 years in Chicago, since I've moved to Chicago, I've primarily photographed demonstrations, and I've made street photography, which I really didn't do in New York. I've become less comfortable photographing at demonstrations. I mean, I mean, this is a place, to be honest, I don't think they're my stories to tell anymore. I think that I sit with a lot of privilege, and I am older now, and I just started to feel, the only way I can put it is that I just wasn't going to add anything. There's a ubiquity of imagery out there, and my pictures are just not doing anything. I mean, my friends are seeing them, my Instagram followers, which are a combination of professional and personal, but I'm not making a difference with my pictures. So I don't feel like that's my place right now. Does that answer your question, Ellen?
Yeah, I think it does. I struggle with exactly the same things, and I'm not out demonstrating either. I'm also scared of COVID, and I'm also older. But I end up putting my pictures together in ways that create sort of art installations because of exactly what you're talking about. And I struggle with this current situation as to what's my place in it, and what is just me of white privilege having the opportunity to jump onto this and say, hey, I care. So I share what you're saying.
Well, I also think we have to recognize that, you know, a lot of people have been doing this work to try and make change and use their pictures to better the way people look at things, or whatever the case may be. This isn't new. And at least for me, these questions aren't new. I personally just want to find a way to, I don't think making pictures is the only way for me to engage at this point.
I want to say to that point that your editing work, just in general, but with reading the pictures, it's exactly the point that Sheila mentioned about what do pictures want, right? That question, I believe it's originally from Fred Ritkin, that I believe somebody can check that. But asking what do pictures want, I believe that your work as an editor, a co-editor, does that. It's another extension of your activism. Your feet aren't on the ground in the same way they used to be. And that's a normal cycle of our lives, right? We get into other things. And I think that's exactly what it's about, looking at the pictures, thinking about one or two pictures at a time, really digging into the pictures. So I highly recommend, if you don't know already, this work, Reading the Pictures.
So readingthepictures.org.
There you go.
Joe, if you could share the link,
I mean,
that would be awesome. We
It's the
read pictures.
The pictures that you see, or at least the pictures that I see, and I'm thinking about, and then I go over to that website. They've already written a whole thing and thoughtful thoughts about it. I mean, I wanted to make sure that, Wara, did you have anything you wanted to add about that last question?
No entendí la
Wara, si quieres
¿Puedes decir la
ajustar. Bueno, han hablado mucho acerca de de ser blanca y cubrir, por decirte, a afrobrasileros o afroamericanos, y cómo te sientes tú cuando no es tu gente, digamos. ¿Cómo te sientes?
En las protestas, bueno, voy a ir un poquito más allá. En las protestas feministas siempre hemos tenido ese problema de que hombres vengan a hacernos fotos, ¿no? Intentamos que dar espacio a mujeres que puedan hacer las fotos. Yo en esto
Iremos por partes. Wara says that she's always confronted this problem of men trying to photograph women. Puede seguir. Lo estoy resumiendo.
Sí, y en esto de las protestas de blancas que vienen a hacer las fotos de las marchas negras, creo que yo, porque también me he sentido discriminada en algún momento, creo que en algunos escenarios es importante yo me sentiría un poco más tranquila si vienen a fotografiarme gente que sea como yo, ¿no? Porque siempre es la mirada del otro.
She says that how she has suffered in her own skin racism. So, but when she is in, let's say, covering Black people, she would rather, she understands exactly if they don't like it, because she feels uncomfortable herself. She feels more comfortable when she covers her own people.
Porque siempre es la mirada del blanco sobre nuestras historias, también tiene que ver con el tema de la colonia, de cómo nos han ido ellos mostrando, ¿no? Cuando nosotros nos podemos mostrar por sí solos.
Yeah.
Es algo así.
Yeah, it's like she feels that it's always the white people on top of also, let's say, the indigenous. Mm-hmm. And you can always show that. And so she has those questions. Why can't we ourselves also speak loud about that?
Yes. Thank you. Gracias.
Leslie, you want me to keep going?
Oh, sure, please.
Okay, so there's a couple more questions, but I do want to just call out that in sort of following on these comments, one attendee shared the Photographers Without Borders Code of Ethics as a something to all photographers to take a look at. I also want to call attention to the Authority Collective. Mm-hmm. They also have some guidance on photography during times of protest. So there's some great resources out there that are great food for thought for photographers as they're out on the street.
We also had, real quick. I just want to be mindful of everyone's time.
Yes,
we have just about 5 more minutes. And also I just want to make Jelly, I just want to make a really quick correction. I cited the wrong author. What Do Pictures Want? I put it over as W.J.T. Mitchell, not Fred Richin, who's brilliant, and everybody should check out Fred. But this book, What Do Pictures Want, is quite interesting. Thank you, Shelley.
Sure. So do we want to take one more question, or do you want to wrap up?
It's up to you guys. Meg, Wara, do you have time for one more? No.
Okay. So I think
we can also wrap. If a quick question, maybe.
Okay. I'm not sure how quick it is, but Linda had a question, and it's but honestly, there was one other thing I wanted to just mention, that another commenter for Wara just had said that she was really moved by your images of the protest, and that she was in Santiago during street protest and saw, how women were using their bodies, their voices, and pots as a way to use song as a weapon. And, and she also mentioned that she just really thanks you for your documentation of those. So I'm going to turn to Linda Olszewski for the last question that I think both Meg and Wara can answer. So Linda, if you want to go ahead.
Yes, thank you. For all the please share what moment and what picture that you believe made a difference, that made an impact of change for a climactic shift in the consciousness of humanity. And I can say that in Spanish para Laura. Laura, ¿cuál es el momento y el foto que tú hiciste para hacer un cambio de la impacto para la humanidad? Gracias.
You're not referencing you don't want us to reference our pictures, right? You're talking about historical imagery, or?
I'm talking about your pictures, the pictures, something that you felt, wow, this made a difference. I am so glad I'm a photographer.
I don't know if I feel that way about any of my pictures. I mean, maybe I don't feel that way about any of my pictures because I don't think that they have been seen by such a, I don't know. I'm sorry, Linda. I can't answer that question. Maybe Lara can.
La pregunta es...
¿Cuál de tus fotos sientes tú que ha hecho una diferencia o un impacto a todos, digamos?
Creo que tengo una serie que se llama Sueña, de fotos de mujeres cholas bajo el agua, no sé si entenderán.
Yeah.
Pero,
Les diré eso. She has a project that is called Cholas, that is, we're taking underwater. She submerged the chola under the water.
son indígenas musas.
They are indigenous muses.
Y esta foto ha sido vista por una niña que estaba agarrada de la mano por su mamá que era indígena.
A little girl that was holding hands with her mother got to see this picture.
Y la niña ha visto sorprendida la foto de esta musa indígena y supongo que ha pensado que el mundo tal vez podría ser diferente porque generalmente a las indígenas se las muestra como pobres, vendiendo en el suelo, eso.
Yeah.
Entonces...
This girl was very surprised, this little girl was so surprised when she saw this. And Wara thinks that maybe this helps to see the chola figure in a different way.
Entonces, tal vez si empezamos, no sé si habrá cambiado en el mundo algo, pero la niña tal vez ha visto que habían posibilidades diferentes para una persona indígena, es probable.
And probably this girl can see that there's different options for indigenous people. That's it.
Thank you. So I think that's a beautiful place to end. So the answer is a resounding yes.
Yeah, I don't want to negate the question. I just don't, I can't.
Of your pictures,
pinpoint
certainly.
what, yeah.
Right, right. I mean, another great conversation later could be, you know, what images exist outside of our own, right? That was that image that moved.
Yeah, that
us.
I could answer.
Yeah, right. So that we'll hold those and we'll just maybe share that on social media. But I just want to send a heartfelt thank you to our guests. Wara, thank you so much. I'm honored to meet you here. I look forward to when we meet in person. And Meg, of course. And Sheila, who's of course out doing it right now. And Shelley and Joe, and again to Katie and Maria. Thank you so much. So I don't have any closing thoughts. I think Wara did it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We appreciate everybody's participation. And I just want to quickly thank our sponsors and thank, in addition to thanking our panelists. And I will get we have several sponsors that you'll see here on the slide. They've been making all of the webinars possible that we've been having during our virtual International Photo Festival. They're making conversations like this possible. So we want to thank them for doing that. I also want to call attention on June 12th, which is a Friday. We have 2 webinars planned. It's a full day of, almost a full day of really great content. We're going to be hearing from Ernesto Bazan, an incredible photographer, from 12 to 1:30. And then from 4:30 to 6, you'll get to hear from a whole panel of really experienced photo editors led by Sarah Lean to talk about how to make your pitch perfect for photographers who are looking to get their photos out there. So thanks everyone for coming. We appreciate it. Again, the webinar has been recorded. We'll be making that available. Lots of links. Those will be made available as well. Thanks again to Wara, to Meg, to Sheila, to Leslie. Leslie, thank you so much for putting this together.
And thank you for the Sunday morning participants coming in on Sunday in various time zones. It means a lot.
Yeah, it's been great, and we appreciate everybody's participation.